Hello everybody, I am the TheOGgamer, and welcome back to The Gamer's Den, your weekly, yes that's right, I said weekly, podcast for all things gaming, both old and new. So as I said, like I said, I do plan on doing weekly episodes, and the reason for this is because it gives me time to prepare material and whatnot, and ironically I didn't actually prepare material for this episode. I'm actually doing this with kind of some of it's kind of off the top of my head because I've read about it, and some of it is what I've experienced in this particular game series, which is the Jak and Daxter series. Now, there are 5 games total in the Jak and Daxter series. There's Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy, Jak 2, Jak 3, Jak X Racing, and Jak and Daxter, the Lost Frontier, which no one really talks about. And quite frankly, I don't intend on talking about it today either. Instead, we're going to be focusing on Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy, Jak 2, and Jak 3. I would say Jak X Racing, however, I don't... It's not that I don't like the game, it's really more of just a racing game. It was more Naughty Dog's excuse to make a racing game out of Jak and Daxter, like they did with Crash Bandicoot. So I don't really consider it to be... It's really not got any bearing on the canon storyline or any kind of points that we're going to be looking at that we're going to be theorizing on today or even touching on. So therefore, I'm not going to be mentioning it. So, first of all, getting right out of the gate, we're going to go with Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy. So, this game came out, if I'm not mistaken, in 2001. So actually, as of today, the present, it is 21 years old, which, for what it's worth, makes me feel old because I remember playing it as a kid. I actually had it for PS2. My brother was the one who originally got it. I don't remember if he bought it with money that he earned or how he come about getting it, or if it was one of the original games that Mom and Dad bought with the PS2 when they bought it. I have no clue. But what I do know is that I remember watching my brother play it, and I really wanted to play it, and it turned out it was, I believe, rated E, so Mom had no issue with me playing it either. So when he wasn't playing it, I was, and I actually never did. It wasn't until later on in my life, I guess probably 5 or 6 years later, that I actually went and did a 100% playthrough of it, my very first 100% playthrough of it. And that was because, frankly, I just didn't care too much at that time for messing with the story or actually progressing. I just liked screwing around in the game. Which, granted, I still get like that sometimes. You know, even with, like, currently I've been playing Just Cause 3, because I happen to have it on my PS4 thanks to a buddy of mine. And, I don't really care so much for the story as I do just going and blowing stuff up in that game. But anyways, we're talking about Jak and Daxter. So the whole premise of the storyline is that your best friend Daxter falls into a vat of dark eco, and as such is ejected out of it in the form of an odsel, which is an otter. It's like an otter and a weasel mixed, effectively. And the whole game is that you're trying to make your way up north to Gul Acheron, who is basically the Dark Eco Sage. Unfortunately, however, as the story progresses, you realize that Gul is actually the one that is causing all the trouble. You see, as it turns out, there'd been a plot which Jak and Daxter had discovered a tiny sliver of there on Misty Island. There was a plot to invade Sandover Village, which was where Jak and Daxter lived. But before they had the chance to take this information back to Samos, they get attacked, which leads to Daxter falling into the Dark Eco. And it wasn't until later on in the game that you discovered that Gul Acheron and his sister Maya were the two shadowy figures you see on Misty Island, speaking to the lurkers and telling them that if the locals possess precursor technology to kill them and take it. And as you progress, you realize that this is not that Sandover Village was not an isolated event either. That this has happened to previous villages, and that the sages, the rest of the sages, with the exception of Samos, the green sage, had been kidnapped and had been taken to Golemaya's citadel. And of course, you had to fight your way through the citadel and destroy their precursor robot to stop them from flooding the world with dark eco. But this, of course, also means that Daxter is permanently inaudible because the only man that have even a remote chance of returning him to his previous form is now dead, or presumed dead. We don't really ever get a confirmation for sure. I think that might have been Naughty Dog's way of trying to set up a second game. I don't know. Because anyone who's played it probably remembers at the end, as the head of the robot, which is also the cockpit, is sinking into the dark eco, and they're trapped in there when the silo slams shut. Samo says the dark eco probably destroyed them. So it left a opening there for there to be like a reveal that, oh no, they're actually still alive somehow and they escaped. Of course, I think maybe the writers realized that they kind of wrote themselves into a corner, because now, if they did have Gull and Maya come back and escape, well, then that's going to be calling into question just how deadly really is Dark Eco if it's not able to kill these people. And what's more is that then now you have to use them as a villain because you hinted at them potentially being alive. So rather than saying that the Dark Eco may not have destroyed them, they just simply said probably destroyed them, as a way of covering themselves, in case they did decide to change things, which they wound up doing in Jak 2. Jak 2 took a more of a GTA approach to things, largely in part to the fact that, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was GTA 3 or 4 was coming out at that time and was very popular, and so they wanted to appeal to the teens of the era, so they made Jak 2 a lot like GTA. And they aged Jak up a couple of years, gave him Dark Eco powers, basically. And of course, that all is explained through the storyline, so if you want to play it, you'll figure that out. But, they made it darker and grittier. And it was fun, but it was difficult because they were so focused on going dark and gritty with it that they neglected to look at specific game mechanics, like, for example, checkpoints. You might get through an entire obstacle course, and then you fall right before the end, and you got to do that entire thing over again. That's probably the most frustrating part of Jak 2, is checkpoints. And then you have Jak 3. Now, Jak 3 was kind of a mixture between the first and the second game. You have the colorful, lush environments of, like, the first game, but you still have the dark and kind of grittiness of the second one. And you get new powers like Light Jak, to balance out Dark Jak. We learn more about Jak's origins and whatnot. But you can tell by looking, at the storyline that it was not... I don't think a sequel was really planned out, per se. I think the writers just simply left an opening so that in the event that Jak and Daxter 2 did wind up going into development, that they would have that possibility of a villain in Gull and Maya. But I'm getting off topic. We need to get to theories. So, the two main theories for the first Jak and Daxter is called intentional cheat mode and more planned areas. Now, in intentional cheat mode, what I'm talking about is that it was possible that cheat mode was left accessible in games intentionally. In several earlier game builds, for example, the Jak 3, for example, Jak 3, the button sequence for activating cheat mode is shorter in the earlier versions of it. Now, the longer sequence was used for Jak 3 during the October 2004 review and the retail version of Jak 3. This can mean that the developers made cheat mode easier to access during development, but when getting close to release, they made the activation sequence longer instead of disabling it. Which, reading this, because I'm actually reading this off of a web page, which I will leave a link to it in the description if y'all want to go check it out. Maybe y'all see something I don't. But I think they did that. I think it is very possible that they did it intentionally, but I don't think they did it with the idea that someone was going to find it. I think they did it with the idea of, rather than just taking it out, which might have been probably maybe more work, because I don't know what kind of software they were using. Instead, they just made it longer with the hopes it would just dissuade people from messing with it, and also reduce the possibility of someone finding it by accident and then spreading it to their friends. And then the other one was more planned areas. So anyone who got a copy of Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy, like a physical copy, for the PS2, would get a map. It was an actual paper map of the entire area, but that was not what the original map looked like. A different version of the map of this game can actually be found among the files of the Jak 2 earlier demo. And it may be older than the final map, since several unknown areas appear on it that can't be found on the final version of the map. Of course, it could also just be that a dev was being creative and drew things over the final map. But it looks like the developers were... I think they were trying to come up with a new idea for Jak 2. And their idea was maybe use the same map, but use the same era and map and everything, but add areas to it for you to explore with that. It's something along those lines is what I think, but I'm not really for sure on that. I don't remember, is Misty Island even showed on the map? It doesn't look like it. I can't really tell. Anyways, but there's really those are the only two theories for the original Jak and Daxter game. Now we're gonna move on to Jak 2. It was actually hinted at one point in development. Oh, my bad. Baron boss fight at the weapons factory. It is hinted at one point in development you get to fight the Baron at the weapons factory instead of Crew. Now I don't know a whole lot about that because I've not gotten that far in the game. I've never really gotten very far in Jak 2. I know how it ends because I've watched Let's Plays of it. But I don't really know. I've never played it myself, so I don't know how well it actually plays. I know I have fought the Baron the first time on there, and that was extremely frustrating. So I can only imagine how frustrating it is to try to fight Crew. But yeah, apparently the Baron boss fight was originally going to be at the weapons factory, and instead they replaced that boss fight with a boss fight with Crew. Also, and to back this up, in the Jak 2 later demo, there's an inaccessible mission named Beat Baron in Weapons Lab. In the final version, the mission's name has Crew instead of Baron in it. So it's very possible that the original mission was that you're going to be fighting the Baron there. Then there is the Dark Guards. The Elite Guards were going to be dark at some point in development before becoming yellow. And the facts to back this up, the Elite Guard is internally referred to as Dark Guard. There's old footage that have gray guards during the Rescue Friends from Fortress mission, though the quality does not make it easy to tell their exact color. The Jak 2 July 2003 preview builds Elite Hellcats have a dark color overall, and KG logo on them is gray. In the final version, the Elite Hellcats have a somewhat yellowish color, and the Elite Guards are yellow. In the Jak 2 July 2003 preview, that build has no mentions or references to Elite Guards, while the Jak 2 August of 2003 review build already had the yellow Elite Guards. If Elite Guards ever had a different color, then it was most likely between these two builds. On to the next thing, the gun course music. it is likely there was going to be some kind of music for the gun course of Jak 2, although there wasn't. Interestingly enough, the game tries to play music when you're at the gun course. The missing music is called Gun Game. If you put a MUS file into the MUS folder and name it gungame.mus, the game will play it while you're in the gun course area. Even the Jak 2 earlier demo tries to play the music Gun Game at the gun course, but it does not have that music file either. There's also supposed to be music at the weapons factory. We can go on and keep going on with music, but let's keep going. The construction site is a very unimportant area in Jak 2, but some things are hinted that the devs have more plans for this level. Now, I don't know a whole lot about that. Okay. So, okay, sorry, I was reading something. Anyways, so yeah, there's a lot of theories floating around for Jak and Daxter. I have some of my own personal theories, which are based off of theories I have read about, and a lot of that would have to do with has to do with the lore. So, as we know, at the end of Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy, they find the Rift Rider atop the well, actually, before, let me rephrase that. They find a glowing white light atop the Citadel. It is later revealed in Jak 2 to be the Rift Rider. Now, the Rift Rider allows them to travel through time, but I don't think that's the only function that the Rift Rider has. And the reason I say this is because if you noticed, when Jak and Daxter open the Rift Rider, or the Rift Gate, Core pokes his head through, right? And says, "You cannot hide from me, boy." And yet, when we go into the future, we find out that Core actually already has a young version of Jak, the kid that you see when you first get out of prison. And that brings the question, well, if he already had young Jak, why did he need to go after teenage Jak? You know, why was he saying you cannot hide from me if he already has them? It makes no sense. You wouldn't be searching for somebody if you already had them right next to you. I think this is a different version of Core that we're seeing. I think there's actually multiple timelines involved in the Jak and Daxter series. To kind of explain this, more or less, so think of it like this. So you have Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy. Then the beginning of Jak 2, when they open the Rift Gate, they allow Core from a different timeline, who had not yet found Jak, to come through. I think in that timeline, that young Jak was sent back in time, but never came back to the future. So Core spent the rest of his days, which basically is unlimited, looking for Jak. And that's when he discovered the Rift Gates. And he starts looking into how to activate them. And he finds the very last one that hadn't been destroyed or broken. And that Rift Gate opens up, and he pokes his head through to see what's there. And that's when he sees young Jak, a now teenage Jak, with Daxter, Samos, and Kiera. And then Jak hits the button, and in doing so, the coordinates that was in that Rift Rider sends him into a future that he created. Because when Core comes through that portal, his Metalhead army came through as well, and destroyed, and basically began raiding the world. Which then creates the future that we wind up landing in, where Baron Praxis is now ruling over Haven City, and has Jak arrested and uses him for the Dark Warrior program, resulting in Dark Jak. Now, this also creates a time loop. Well, actually, that particular event doesn't. Later on in the story, at the end of the story, Jak and Kiera send a younger Samos and young Jak back in time to Sandover Village, because they realize the only way to keep things going the way they are and to make sure that they don't just fade away out of existence is to send young Jak back to Sandover Village. And so, in doing so, they create a time loop, which closes the time loop and now makes it to where no matter what happens, that has to happen. Now, then you have the events of Jak 3. Now, Jak 3 does not involve time travel that I know of. And we actually learn in Jak 3 of Jak's parentage. And we find out that his father was Deimos, the previous king of Haven City, who was thrown out by Baron Praxis and betrayed and left to die in the wasteland. Jak doesn't find out, however, until Deimos is dying, as with his dying breath, he hands Jak an amulet and tells him that, and asks him to find his son, telling him that he'll know him by that amulet. Jak looks at the amulet and realizes it's the same amulet that his younger self was wearing, when he sent him back in time. And at that point realizes that Deimos is his father. Now, this also means that that Jak's name is actually Mar, because Deimos says that his son's name is Mar. This, of course, led to a theory that Jak was the Mar, that perhaps he found another Rift Rider somehow, or maybe him and Kiera built one and went further back in time and started the line of the House of Mar. But that would also mean that Jak would be like his own 15th great grandfather or something. And I just don't see that happening, because that would create a paradox. Granted, we already have a paradox, but that would also create another paradox where, in order for Jak to exist, Jak has to exist. So, my personal theory on who Mar is I think Mar is the warrior we meet in Rock Village in the Precursor Legacy. There's a warrior there who's nursing his wounds, and particularly his head, because he just got his head bashed in by a giant lurker that's been throwing rocks all over Rock Village. And you speak with him, and he says if you get him 90 precursor orbs, he'll move the pontoons. That way you can go and face the monster yourself. I think that warrior got inspired by Jak, and with renewed confidence, began working closely with the sages, and learned how to create the Mars gun effectively. Because that was also the ancestor name was Mar. And I don't know if the developers did that on purpose or what, or what their intentions are as far as what happens to Jak, ultimately. I know we do have the events of the Lost Frontier, but I'm not going to discuss that here. We don't talk about that. Frankly, I like to ignore that game, because it's just terrible. It really is. But anyways, there's that theory. The other theory is about the precursors. So we see their robots all over the place, and it's said that their robots were used to form the planet. Now the interesting thing is that in Jak 3, Count Vigor, who's the one that's trying to kill you effectively, or one of the ones anyways, activates an ancient precursor robot, and the robot is all in one piece and actually does try to kill you, and you have to destroy it. Well, the thing is about this is that if you look in the first Jak and Daxter, when you face off with Gaul and Maya and their precursor robot, they actually have some additions. I don't think that these are actually additions. I think these are replacement parts. And I think these parts are replacing the very same parts that we see trying to get pulled out of the boggy swamp and various other places across the known world at that time. Because you see the lurkers, trying to dig out precursor pieces, trying to pull them out of the swamps. I think that maybe Gull and Maya didn't realize that there were still some intact robots, and were just going after one that they already knew where it was, and then realized there was pieces missing, and had the lurkers looking for the pieces, trying to find any kind of pieces they could find that were out there that they could slap on there. And I think when Jak and Daxter and Kara and Samos kept thwarting them on getting these pieces, they just simply started replacing them with modern technology because they realized they were running short on time. But then again, I could be wrong about that. I may very well be wrong. Let's see, what else was there? Oh, Jak's uncle. So in the first game, the Explorer is what he's called now, but originally he was supposed to be Jak's uncle. And he even refers to himself as such when speaking with Jak, saying, "Can you lend your dear old uncle 90 precursor orbs to get on his way?" Well, interestingly enough, and even the map says it's from his uncle. Well, the funny thing is that in Jak 2, he's not supposed to have any family. And, well, an uncle is family. I have a theory that his uncle might have traveled back in time. That maybe his uncle is also from the future, and that he's Deimos' brother, and that he knows exactly who Jak is. I think that maybe he traveled back to keep an eye on Jak as he grew up. Just to make sure that Samos did like he was supposed to, and all that. I think that maybe he knew about the underground and about the shadow, and that Jak had been taken by them, or Mar, as he probably knew him as. So, I definitely think that maybe the uncle was meant to be a part of that. I think we just didn't quite figure out how until maybe today. At least I hope it was insightful, anyways. What else was there for Jak and Daxter? Yes. Something else I wanted to discuss. If you noticed, the change in game mechanics. Something I want to point out, because I see this so much with some of the newer games, is that Jak and Daxter, from the Precursor Legacy all the way to at least, I know, 3. I'm not sure about the Lost Frontier, as I've never played it, but I know for a fact with 3, from that one to 3, the game mechanics are basically the same. You can double jump, you can ground pound, you can spin kick, and you can punch. And the controls to do that stay the same. You could choose, if you wanted to, although it'd probably be more difficult, to go completely through Jak 2 using nothing but your fists, not using a single gun. As I said, it'd probably be substantially more difficult, but possible. The only addition to the gameplay mechanics is the guns, which, frankly, I think it's funny. They were going for a GTA-style game, and ironically, they actually made it more like Ratchet and Clank. Which, I don't know, maybe that was the goal with the guns, was to kind of have a more of a Ratchet and Clank feel to it. Because I know that was kind of a popular game at that time as well, as I did play some of them, and they were a lot of fun. Some of the guns had all these, all the different guns and all the different functionalities. I think probably the most used gun in Jak 3 was the refractor or reflector. I think it was reflector beam gun. It was the reflector beam rifle. All you had to do was jump and spin while firing, and you would clear an entire room in seconds. It was ridiculous. Ridiculously OP. But, my point remains is the guns did change the game mechanics a little bit, but as far as how the game controlled, getting around the map, nothing changed on that, and that was something I really loved about that, and it's something I feel like that a lot of the newer game developers really should take notes about, because as long as you keep your base controls and not change them, like for example Gears of War, then you're gonna keep people coming back because they're gonna see, oh hey look, here's you know such and such 2. Well, I bet it controls just as good as its predecessor, and they'll try it. Now, granted, usually they'll try your sequel regardless, but once you do a third sequel, that's where they start getting a little bit cautious because, like, well, I don't know, they changed the controls between the first and second one. Why would I want to play the third one? That kind of thing. But anyways, I'm running out of time here, guys. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Don't forget to leave a like, and also don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Also, hit that bell icon down below. That will notify y'all the next time I upload a video, be it an episode of this or maybe I'll probably get another episode of Fable out. I'm not really sure yet. But I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye!